Hey, you there. Before we jump into this wild story, drop a comment below and tell me, where are you watching from today? Oh, and if you love a good tale where the underdog wins big, smash that subscribe button right now. Here's a question to get you thinking. Have you ever had a nosy neighbor who thought they could boss you around? What would you do if they messed with something really important to you? Stick around because this story about to blow your mind. It was a bright, sunny afternoon in Meadowview, a small, quiet neighborhood where houses sat in neat rows and kids rode bikes down the street. Everyone seemed to know what everyone else was doing. If someone planted new flowers, the whole street talked about it by dinner. If a dog barked too loud, you'd hear whispers about it at the mailbox. That's just how Meadowview was, full of curious eyes and chatty mouths. But there was one person who didn't fit into all that chatter. Her name was Mia Carter, and she was the kind of person you might walk right past without noticing. Mia lived in a little white house with a tidy lawn and a red front door. She wasn't loud or flashy. She didn't throw big parties or hang fancy lights for holidays. She just went about her day, doing simple things like watering her flowers or sweeping her porch. When neighbors passed by, she'd give a small wave and a shy smile. Most folks thought she was nice enough, but boring. Mia's just there, they'd say with a shrug. Nobody spent much time thinking about her. Nobody asked what she did when she was alone, and that was exactly how Mia liked it. Because Mia had a secret, a big one. It wasn't something she told anyone, not her neighbors, not the mailman, not even the friendly old lady who brought her cookies every Christmas. Mia's secret was hidden in her backyard, inside a plain gray shed that looked like it could belong to anybody. From the outside, that shed was nothing special. It had a slanted roof, a creaky door, and a rusty padlock that kept it shut tight. If you peeked over the fence, you'd probably think, she keeps a lawnmower in there, maybe some old tools. But you'd be wrong, so wrong. Inside that shed was something amazing, something that could make your jaw drop and your eyes go wide, but nobody knew, not yet. Meadowview wasn't perfect, though. Oh no. It had one giant problem, and her name was Karen Thompson. Karen was the president of the HOA, which stood for Homeowners Association. That meant she got to make rules about how houses should look, what colors people could paint their fences, and even how tall grass could grow before someone got in trouble. Karen loved rules. She loved them so much she carried a clipboard everywhere, jotting down notes about every tiny thing she didn't like. "Your mailbox is too shiny," she'd tell one neighbor. "Your bushes are too wild," she'd scold another. People rolled their eyes when they saw her coming, her sneakers squeaking and her voice booming like she was the queen of the world. Karen wasn't just bossy, she was nosy. She'd peek into backyards, snoop around porches, and ask questions that weren't her business. "Why's your car parked like that?" she'd say, or "What's that bag of dirt doing on your driveway?" Nobody liked it, but nobody argued much either. Karen had a way of making you feel small, like you'd done something wrong even when you hadn't. And for some reason, Karen had decided Mia was her next big project. It started small. One day, Karen stopped by Mia's fence while Mia was pulling weeds. "Mia," Karen called, her voice sharp like a teacher catching you chewing gum. "Your grass looks uneven. The HOA rules say it's gotta be 2 inches tall, no more, no less. Fix it." Mia looked up, her hands muddy, and nodded. "Okay, Karen, I'll check it." But Karen didn't leave. She stood there, tapping her pen on her clipboard, staring at Mia's backyard. Her eyes landed on the shed, and they stayed there a little too long. "What's in that shed anyway?" Karen asked, tilting her head. "It's always locked. Kinda weird, don't you think?" Mia's heart gave a little thump, but she kept her face calm. "Just stuff," she said softly. "Nothing special." Karen raised an eyebrow like she didn't believe a word. She said, scribbling something on her clipboard. "We'll see about that." Then she marched off, her ponytail bouncing like it was just as bossy as she was. Mia watched her go, her hands tightening around her garden trowel. She didn't like how Karen looked at the shed. It was like Karen could smell a secret, like a dog sniffing out a hidden treat. Mia glanced at the shed, its gray paint peeling just a bit, and whispered to herself, "Stay safe in there. Nobody's gonna find you." But deep down, she felt a tiny knot in her stomach. Karen wasn't the kind of person to let things go. The next day, Mia noticed something odd. She was watering her roses when she saw Karen walking by her house not once but twice. The first time, Karen pretended to be checking her phone, but Mia caught her sneaking a glance at the backyard. The second time, Karen stopped right at the fence, stood on her tiptoes, and peered over straight at the shed. Mia's heart thumped again. What was Karen up to? Why did she care so much about a boring old shed? By the end of the week, Karen was everywhere. She'd stroll by Mia's house in the morning, her clipboard tucked under her arm. She'd come back in the afternoon, sometimes with a neighbor, pointing at Mia's yard and whispering. Once Mia overheard her talking to Mr. Larson, who lived across the street. "That shed's suspicious," Karen said, her voice low but loud enough to carry. "Nobody locks something up that tight unless they're hiding something bad." Mr. Larson just nodded, but Mia felt her cheeks get hot. Hiding something bad, if only they knew the truth. Mia tried to stay calm. She kept mowing her lawn, kept waving to neighbors, kept acting like nothing was wrong. But every night when the stars came out and the street went quiet, she'd slip into her backyard and check the shed. She'd tug on the padlock, making sure it was still tight. She'd listen for any strange noises, like someone sneaking around. And sometimes she'd open the door just a crack and peek inside. What she saw made her smile, even when she was nervous. It was her secret, her treasure, and she'd do anything to keep it safe. One morning, things got worse. Mia was sipping coffee on her porch when Karen showed up again, this time with a big smile that didn't look friendly at all. "Good morning, Mia," Karen said, her voice sugary but sharp. "I've been thinking about that shed of yours. It's not painted the right color. HOA rules say all sheds gotta be blue or green. Yours is gray. That's a violation." Mia blinked. "A violation for paint? I didn't know," she said quietly. "I'll look into it." "You better," Karen snapped, her smile gone. "And while you're at it, maybe open that shed for an inspection. We need to make sure you're following all the rules." She tapped her clipboard, her eyes locked on Mia like a cat watching a mouse. Mia's stomach twisted. An inspection? No way could she let Karen anywhere near that shed. "I'll handle the paint," Mia said, keeping her voice steady. "Don't worry." Karen didn't look happy, but she left for now. Mia watched her walk away, her sneakers squeaking on the sidewalk. Another day, another chance for Karen to ruin it, Mia sighed to herself. She glanced at the shed, its padlock glinting in the sun. She didn't know it yet, but today was different. Today was the day everything would start to change. As the hours passed, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming. Karen wasn't just being nosy anymore, she was digging, like she was sure Mia was up to no good. And Mia, she was starting to realize she couldn't stay quiet forever. Her secret was too important, too special to let someone like Karen mess with it. But what could she do? How do you stop someone who thinks they're in charge of everything? That afternoon, Mia sat in her kitchen, staring out the window at the shed. She thought about all the times Karen had snooped around, all the times she'd tried to make Mia feel small. She thought about the neighbors who didn't know the real Mia at all. And she thought about what was inside that shed, something so incredible it made her heart swell just picturing it. "Nobody's gonna take you away," she whispered like the shed could hear her. "Not Karen, not anybody." But as the sun dipped lower and shadows stretched across the yard, Mia felt that knot in her stomach grow. Karen wasn't giving up. The clipboard, the rules, the sneaky looks, it was all building to something. Mia didn't want trouble, but she was ready to protect what mattered most. She just hoped it wouldn't come to that. Little did she know, Karen was already planning her next move. And when it came, it would shake Mia's world like nothing ever had before. Karen Thompson had her eyes glued on Mia's shed for weeks. It was just a small wooden box in Mia's backyard, painted a dull gray that didn't stand out. It looked like any old shed, the kind where people keep rakes or dusty cans of paint. Nothing fancy, right? But Karen didn't see it that way. She'd walk by Mia's house, squinting at that shed like it was hiding a monster. "Why's it always locked?" she mumbled to herself one day, her hands on her hips. "Nobody locks a shed that tight unless they're up to something. I bet it's against HOA rules." Mia didn't know it, but Karen was making a plan. Karen wasn't just the nosy neighbor who liked to snoop. She was the president of the HOA, the group that made rules for the whole neighborhood. She loved rules more than anything. She'd write them down on her clipboard, checking off every little thing that wasn't perfect. If your fence was too tall, Karen would know. If your flowers were too wild, Karen would tell you to fix them. And now, that shed was her new target. One bright morning, Karen marched straight to Mia's fence, her clipboard flapping like a flag in a storm. She wore her usual sneakers, the ones that squeaked with every step, and her face looked like she was ready to win a fight. "Mia," she shouted, loud enough for the whole street to hear. Mia was in her garden, watering her daisies with a green hose. She jumped a little when she heard her name, water splashing on her shoes. "Yes, Karen?" Mia asked, her voice soft and polite. She stood up, brushing dirt off her hands. Karen pointed at the shed like it had done something wrong. "That shed is an eyesore," she barked. "It's not painted the right color. The HOA handbook says sheds have to be blue or green. Yours is gray and it's ugly. You've got 1 week to repaint it, or you're in big trouble." Mia blinked, her fingers tightening around the hose. Trouble for a shed? She glanced at it, sitting quietly in the corner of her yard, and her heart gave a little thump. "It's just a shed, Karen," she said, keeping her voice calm. "I'll check the rules, okay?" Karen's eyes narrowed and she smirked like she knew something Mia didn't. "You better check fast," she said. "I'm watching you, Mia Carter." Then she turned and strutted away, her clipboard tucked under her arm, her sneakers squeaking all the way down the sidewalk. Mia stood there, staring at the shed. Her heart was racing now, like a rabbit running from a fox. Nobody could know what was inside that shed. Not Karen, not the neighbors, not anyone. It wasn't junk or old tools like everyone probably thought. It was something special, something so important that Mia checked the lock every night to make sure it was safe. She took a deep breath and whispered to the shed, "Don't worry, I won't let her near you." But Karen wasn't done. Oh no, she was just getting started. That afternoon, she went to Mrs. Jenkins' house, the lady who lived next door to Mia. They sat on Mrs. Jenkins' porch, sipping coffee and eating cookies. Karen leaned close, her voice low but sharp. "Mia's up to something," she said, her eyes glinting. "That shed of hers, it's suspicious. Why's it locked all the time? I bet she's storing junk in there, or maybe something worse." Mrs. Jenkins frowned, setting her cookie down. "Worse? Like what, Karen?" Karen shrugged, but her smile was sneaky. "Who knows, maybe stolen stuff, maybe something dangerous. All I know is nobody hides things like that unless they're trouble." She took a big sip of coffee, letting her words sink in. Mrs. Jenkins didn't say much, but she looked at Mia's house across the street, her eyebrows scrunched up. By the next day, the whole neighborhood was buzzing. Mrs. Jenkins told Mr. Larson, who told the mailman, who told the lady who walked her dog every morning. Soon, everyone was whispering about Mia's shed. "What's she hiding?" they'd say. "Karen's right, that shed's weird." People started acting different around Mia. When she walked to her mailbox, neighbors would stop talking and stare. When she waved at Mr. Larson, he'd nod quickly and look away. Even the kids who used to ride their bikes up and down the street stopped coming near her house. One boy, Tommy, rode by once but sped up when he saw the shed, like it might jump out and chase him. Mia noticed it all, and it made her stomach feel tight, like she'd eaten too many apples. Still, Mia didn't let it show. She dealt with nosy people before, back when she lived in another town. She knew how to stay calm, how to keep her secrets safe. Every morning, she'd go about her day like nothing was wrong. She'd water her flowers, sweep her porch, and smile at anyone who passed by. But every time she looked at the shed, she'd whisper to herself, "Stay safe in there, just a little longer." Karen wasn't making it easy, though. She started walking by Mia's house more often, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. She'd slow down at the fence, peering into the backyard like she was trying to see through the shed's walls. Once Mia caught her standing on a box, stretching to look over the fence. "Just checking your grass," Karen called when she saw Mia watching, but her cheeks were red and she hurried away. Another time, Karen brought her friend Susan along. They stood by the fence, pointing at the shed and talking in loud whispers. "It's not just the color," Karen said, loud enough for Mia to hear from her porch. "It's the lock. Why's it so big? She's definitely hiding something." Susan nodded, her eyes wide. "Maybe we should tell the HOA board," she said. Karen grinned. "Oh, we will." Mia heard every word and her heart beat faster. The HOA board, that meant more people poking around, asking questions. She couldn't let that happen. She thought about painting the shed blue just to make Karen happy, but she knew it wouldn't stop her. Karen didn't care about paint. She wanted to know what was inside, and she wouldn't quit until she found out. That night, Mia sat in her kitchen, the lights dim. She stared out the window at the shed, its gray shape barely visible in the moonlight. She thought about Karen's clipboard, her sneaky smiles, her whispers to the neighbors. She thought about the funny looks people gave her now, like she was a stranger instead of the quiet woman who'd lived there for years. And she thought about what was in the shed, something so amazing, it made all this trouble worth it. "I can handle this," Mia told herself, her voice barely a whisper. "I've kept you safe this long. Karen's not gonna win." But even as she said it, she felt a little shiver. Karen was like a dog with a bone, and Mia knew she'd keep digging. What would happen if she got too close? What would happen if the whole neighborhood turned against her? Mia didn't have answers yet, but she had a plan. She'd stay quiet, stay smart, and keep her eyes on Karen. Because one thing was sure, that shed wasn't just a shed, it was a treasure chest, and Mia would protect it with everything she had. Days went by in Meadowview, and Karen got braver with every step she took. She wasn't just sneaking glances at Mia's shed anymore, she was practically living outside Mia's fence. Every morning, she'd march by Mia's house, her clipboard swinging like it was her best friend. She'd stop, stare at the shed, and squint like she could see right through its gray walls. Sometimes she'd come back at lunch, then again before dinner, always peeking over the fence. Her sneakers squeaked louder each time, like they were shouting, "I'm watching you." One day, Karen went too far. Mia was inside washing dishes when she glanced out her kitchen window. There was Karen right by the shed, looking around like a cat checking for dogs. She thought Mia wasn't home. Karen reached out, grabbed the shed's padlock, and gave it a hard tug. She yanked it once, then twice, her face scrunching up like she'd bitten a sour lemon. The lock didn't budge, it was strong and tight, just like Mia wanted. Karen's cheeks turned bright red, and she stomped her foot. "This is ridiculous," she huffed, loud enough for Mia to hear through the glass. "Nobody hides stuff like this unless it's bad news." Mia stood frozen at the sink, her hands dripping with soapy water. She didn't say a word, but her mind was spinning like a top. Karen had tried to break into her shed. What if she'd gotten in? What if she'd seen what was inside? Mia's heart thumped hard, but she stayed quiet. She watched Karen storm off, muttering to herself, her clipboard flapping angrily. Mia dried her hands and whispered, "That was too close." From that moment, Mia knew she had to be extra careful. Every night when the stars twinkled and the neighborhood went silent, she'd slip into her backyard. She'd wear her soft slippers so nobody would hear her steps. She'd creep to the shed, her flashlight making a tiny yellow circle on the ground. She'd check the padlock, tugging it gently to make sure it was still locked tight. Then she'd look around, making sure no one was hiding in the shadows. Sometimes she'd unlock the door just for a second and peek inside. When she did, her face would light up with a soft smile, like she was saying hello to an old friend. Whatever was in there, it made her happy, even when she was scared. Karen didn't stop, though. She got sneakier. She'd walk by with her phone, pretending to talk, but Mia saw her snapping pictures of the shed. Once, Karen brought a ladder from her garage and set it up by the fence. She climbed up, her head poking over like a curious squirrel, trying to get a better look. Mia was in her garden, pulling weeds, and caught her. "Oh, just checking for birds' nests," Karen called, her voice fake and cheery, but her eyes were sharp, and Mia knew she wasn't looking for birds. The neighborhood was changing, too. Karen's whispers had spread like a cold in a classroom. People who used to smile at Mia now gave her funny looks. Mrs. Jenkins, who always waved, crossed the street when she saw Mia coming. Mr. Larson, who liked to chat about his tomatoes, stopped talking when Mia walked by. Even the kids were acting weird. They ride their bikes past Mia's house, but if she was outside, they'd pedal faster, like the shed was haunted. One girl's Lily dropped her ball near Mia's fence and wouldn't go get it. "My mom says not to go near that shed," she told her friends, and they all ran away. Mia felt the weight of it all. It was like a big, heavy blanket pressing down on her. She didn't like being stared at or whispered about. She just wanted to water her flowers and live quietly. But every time she saw the shed, she remembered why she was fighting. Whatever was inside was worth it. She'd keep it safe no matter what. One evening, things got worse. The neighborhood was having a barbecue in the park, with burgers sizzling and music playing. Mia went, hoping to act normal and maybe make people stop staring. She stood by the lemonade table, holding a glass and smiling at anyone who looked her way. That's when she heard Karen's voice, loud and bossy, coming from a crowd nearby. "I'm done waiting," Karen said, waving her hands like she was giving a speech. "Mia's shed is a problem. She won't tell us what's in there, and I'm sick of it. If she won't open it, I'll do it myself. I've got a spare key to every lock in this neighborhood." Mia's lemonade glass shook in her hand and a little spilled on her shirt. A key? How did Karen have a key? Mia's shed had a special lock, one she'd bought herself. There was no way Karen could have a copy, could she? Mia's stomach twisted like a knot in a rope. She pictured Karen sneaking into the shed, opening the door, and finding what was inside. It made her feel sick. She couldn't let that happen. Not now, not ever. Mia slipped away from the barbecue, her heart racing. She walked home fast, checking over her shoulder to make sure nobody followed. When she got to her backyard, she stood by the shed, staring at the lock. It looked the same as always, but now it felt different. Karen's words echoed in her head, "I'll do it myself." Mia touched the padlock, her fingers cold. "I'll stop her," she whispered. "I promise." The next morning, Mia woke up to a nightmare. She opened her curtains, looked at the shed, and gasped. There, shining in the sunlight, was a brand new padlock, one she'd never seen before. It wasn't her lock. Hers was old and a little rusty. This one was silver and fancy, like it belonged on a bank vault. Taped to the shed door was a piece of paper, flapping in the breeze. Mia ran outside, her slippers flapping, and grabbed it. The note was in Karen's neat handwriting. HOA property inspection. "Open this by noon, or we're cutting it off." Mia's heart pounded so loud she could hear it in her ears. Karen had locked her out of her own shed. How did she do it? Why? Mia grabbed the new lock and pulled, but it was stuck tight, like it was laughing at her. She tried her key, but it didn't fit. Inside the shed were things so precious, so important that Mia's eyes stung just thinking about losing them. She pictured Karen with bolt cutters slicing through the lock and her chest got tight. Mia stepped back, her hands shaking. She looked at the note again, then at the shed. Karen thought she'd won. She thought she could scare Mia into giving up, but Mia wasn't scared anymore. She was mad. She crumpled the note in her fist and took a deep breath. "Okay, Karen," she whispered, her voice steady for the first time in days. "You want to play this game? Let's play." Mia didn't know how she'd stop Karen yet, but she knew one thing: that shed was hers and so was its secret. Karen had no idea what she was messing with, and Mia was ready to show her she picked the wrong fight. By 11 a.m., Mia's front yard was like a busy beehive. The whole neighborhood was there, buzzing with whispers and curious looks. Karen had called an emergency HOA meeting, and she made sure everyone showed up. She picked Mia's lawn for it, right in front of the gray shed that had everyone talking. Neighbors stood in clumps, pointing at the shed and murmuring to each other. Kids peeked from behind their parents, wide-eyed, wondering what was going to happen. The air felt heavy, like a storm was coming. Karen stood in the middle of it all, tall and proud, like she was the queen of Meadowview. She held a big pair of bolt cutters in her hands, gripping them tight like they were a shiny trophy. The cutters gleamed in the sunlight, and Karen waved them around so everyone could see. "Time up, Mia," she shouted, her voice loud and sharp, cutting through the chatter. "We're opening that shed right now, and everyone's gonna see what you're hiding." The crowd got quiet, waiting for something big. They'd heard Karen's stories, how Mia's shed was full of junk, or maybe something worse. They leaned forward, eyes locked on the shed's rusty door. Some nodded at Karen like they agreed with her. Others just watched, unsure but too curious to look away. Mia's front door creaked open and she stepped outside. Every head turned to her. She didn't look like the shy, quiet Mia they all knew. Her face was calm, but her eyes were bright and sharp, like she knew something nobody else did. She stood on her porch, her hands steady, her chin up. She didn't look scared at all. She looked ready. The whispers stopped. Even the kids went still. Karen's smirk faltered for a second, but she shook it off. "Well, Mia," she said, waving the bolt cutters again, "got anything to say before we open your little secret?" Mia took a slow step forward, her sneakers soft on the grass. She looked straight at Karen, her voice clear and loud enough for everyone to hear. "Karen," she said, "you really want to know what's in there?" Karen laughed, but it sounded fake, like she was trying too hard. "Oh, I know it's something bad," she snapped. "You've been hiding it for weeks. Step aside, Mia, or I'll cut that lock myself." The crowd murmured again, some people nodding, others frowning. Mia didn't move. She didn't blink. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Her fingers tapped the screen, quick and sure. Nobody knew what she was doing, but they watched, holding their breath. Karen's eyes narrowed and she gripped the bolt cutters tighter. "What's that supposed to do?" she sneered. "Calling for help too late." Before anyone could say another word, a car rolled up to Mia's house. It wasn't just any car, it was a fancy black SUV, shiny and sleek, with dark windows that hid whoever was inside. The crowd turned, staring as the doors opened. Two people stepped out, and they didn't look like neighbors. They wore sharp suits, one gray, one blue, and their faces were serious, like they meant business. One held a shiny badge that glinted in the sun. The other carried a black briefcase, holding it tight like it was full of secrets. Karen's bolt cutters froze in the air halfway to the shed. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. What's this?" she stammered, her voice wobbly now. The crowd shifted, whispering louder, trying to figure out what was happening. Mia smiled for the first time all morning. It wasn't a big smile, but it was strong, like she'd been waiting for this moment. She walked down her porch steps and stood by the shed, facing everyone. "These are my friends," she said, nodding at the two people. "They're from the National History Museum. They're here to check on my shed. You see, Karen, I don't store junk in there. I store rare historical artifacts, things so valuable they're protected by federal law." The crowd gasped like they'd all sucked in air at once. Karen's jaw dropped so low it nearly hit the ground. Her face went pale and the bolt cutters slipped from her hands, clanging loud on the grass. Neighbors looked at each other, eyes wide, mouths open. Kids tugged at their parents' sleeves, whispering, "What's an artifact?" Nobody could believe it. Mia, quiet Mia, she had something that special. The museum people didn't wait. They walked straight to the shed, their shoes clicking on the path. Mia pulled a key from her pocket, not the new, shiny lock Karen had put on.